Hi class, today we are going to be conducting a very fun science experiment. Yes, we'll be working in the classroom, however, we get to use Excel, which is going to be on the computer. It's going to be lots of fun, and we're going to be going on a vacation today. Now, before we start getting into this whole experiment, let's review the properties of matter: mass, volume, and density. Mass is the amount of material in an object, and people also refer to it as weight. It can be found using a triple beam balance. Here we have the nice triple beam balance, and usually things solids are measured in grams. Now we have volume, and volume is how much three-dimensional space a substance, like a solid, liquid, or gas, can contain or take up. That can be found with a graduated cylinder if you're working with water, or say if you're working with a solid like a suitcase, you would do length times width times height, and you'd measure that in centimeters. Lastly, once you have both the mass and the volume, you will be finding the density, and density is found by the equation mass divided by volume. Now that we have all this information, if you guys still are having trouble, we'll be working on the computer, so you can Google things, do whatever you want to get more information. However, the next step is to collect data. Everyone's going to be splitting up into groups of 4, and you'll be measuring the volume of your suitcase. So pack lightly, bring a small suitcase, because everyone needs to get their suitcase onto the plane. So to find the volume, remember it's the length times the width times the height, and since we're working with a solid and not a liquid, we won't be needing this graduated cylinder. Now, next, you'll have to place a few items in your suitcase. Remember, it's going to be warm in Florida, so you want to bring a swimsuit, some flip-flops. Girls, pack a nice dress. Guys, bring shorts and a t-shirt. And remember to pack lightly so that you can bring home souvenirs on your trip. Your parents are going to be coming with you, so since they're not there, you're going to need to bring seashells, some sand from the beach, maybe a t-shirt. So pack and leave some room. Lastly, you're going to take the mass by putting your whole suitcase not on a scale necessarily the size. We have a bigger scale for you guys. And then when you have the mass and the volume, finally you can find the density, and that is mass divided by volume. So if you remember, I told you guys to get into groups of 4. Now we're going to move to our Excel chart, and to just get started, you open up the Excel and you tap anywhere you want. Now I'm going to start in A3. Now I'm going to have, this is going to be my x-axis, so I'm going to have my 4 students. Katie could be a student. Click under it to get the next student in. Bill could be the next student. Rebecca is the 3rd student. And John is the 4th student. Now, that's all you need for the students. And the y-axis is going to be all the measurements. The first thing we're going to be measuring is the volume. And the volume is measured in centimeters cubed, because you remember that you're doing length times width times height. The next thing we're going to be doing is finding the mass, which is found in grams. And it's important to keep the units next to all the measurements so you remember how much everything is, and then in the end it's easier to remember that mass divided by volume is going to be grams per centimeters cubed. So density is the last thing we're going to be computing, and we'll have grams divided by centimeters cubed. See, so that's not that hard. Now we're going to look at our information that we gathered, and what we have is that Katie's suitcase was 20 centimeters cubed, and that was done by finding the length times the width times the height. And Bill's suitcase, which had 60 centimeters cubed, it was a bit bigger. Let's see if that will plug in there. 60. Next we have Jill, who's at 100. And John is at 88. So we have Katie's suitcase, who is the smallest, and Rebecca's suitcase, who is the biggest. Now, just because the suitcase is a certain size doesn't mean it can only hold a certain amount of mass. Remember, someone might be putting really heavy shoes in their suitcase, so their mass is could be more than anyone else's. Some person could only be packing really light shirts and swimsuits, so their suitcase wouldn't be as heavy as someone's who had rocks and shoes and all sorts of heavy things. And now when you look at that, you realize that just because the volume is small doesn't mean that the mass has to be small. So now we're going to compute the mass. Katie was 40 grams. Bill was 100. Jill was 68. I'm sorry, Rebecca was 68, and Henry was 100. Now, see, if you look at this, we have the most grams. Well, 100 was tied, but look, Bill's was 60 centimeters cubed, and John was 88 centimeters cubed. So that just shows that the grams could be a different size, different measurement, no matter what size the volume is. Now, to find density, remember it's mass divided by volume. We're just going to pull up calculator, and for the first one, 40. This computer is going awfully slow today. 40 divided by 20. And that's going to give us 2 grams per centimeters cubed. Now we're going to do the next one, which is 100 divided by 60. Oh, this computer is 100 divided by 60. Now that you can see my computer is going really slow and the buttons are getting hard to click, remember that when you work on the computer, not everything is going to be perfect. So that was, see, look, I have all this stuff popping up on me. All you have to do is read it, cancel it out. Just talking about my printer, I don't need that now. Okay, so density here is going to be 2 and 1.6. Now we'll find the last two, which was 68 divided by 100, and that's 0.68, and then we have 100 divided by 88. 1.13. Now we're going to step back and record all this. So we have 0.68 and 1.13. Easy, huh? You have all the information there. It was very easy to plug in. All you need is the equation once you have the volume and the mass. If you look over here, the one density that's the highest is the... Alright, so now once we packed our suitcase, now we're going to pretend like we're going all the way to Florida. We're going to be there for 3 days, so everyone has 3 days to accumulate a few more items they want to put into their suitcase. So now we're going to make a table for how much our suitcase weighs with mass when we're coming home. We're going to click on this Excel chart over here, and once again, we're going to plug in the 4 students' names. Katie, Bill, Rebecca, and John. We're going to come over, and this will now be our x-axis. We're going to do the volume again in centimeters cubed, the mass in grams, and the density, which is grams per centimeters cubed. Oops, happened all go in caps lock there. Don't want to make silly mistakes like that. Density, grams per centimeters cubed. Okay, so we have the layout of our table made all over again, and now remember that the volume is going to be staying the same because we are keeping the same suitcase. So we have 20 centimeters cubed, 60 centimeters cubed, 100, and then 88. Now, Katie decided to bring back some seashells and sand. So her mass went from 40 to 65. Bill's went from 100 to 160. He packed a lot more on the way back. Rebecca's went from 68 to 92. And John's went from 100 to 116. So he didn't bring back that much. Now, since my calculator was acting up on my computer before, we are just going to find the density using the calculator that I have next to me. So 65 divided by 20 is 3.25. 160 divided by 60 is 2.66. 92 divided by 100 is 0.92. Remember that when you're doing anything divided by 100, it's going to be whatever the numerator is and just put the decimal in front of it. And then 116 divided by 88. That comes out to be 1.31, and we're going to make another graph of this, everyone. So remember, we're going to take this little X thing here, and we're going to drag over all of our information, and we're going to click on bar graph. As you can see, the measurements change, so you need to compare the graphs by just looking at the numbers, and the green, however, gets a little bigger. This just comes to the conclusion that if you put more mass into the same volume, it's going to become more dense, because look, we have the mass growing by 15, and that means the density went from 2 grams per centimeter to 3.25 grams per centimeter. Since all the mass went up, all the densities went up. So this is just something to look at, and it draws us to the conclusion that when there's more mass, it's going to be more dense, and when there's less mass, it's going to be less dense. And it also proves to us that just because something has a small volume doesn't mean its density is going to necessarily be small too, because it could have a big mass or it could have a small mass. So these are things to look at. Now, say if we were going to conduct a different experiment, we could do a pop can floating in water and find out how dense the pop can is. You could do that by basically putting water and measuring the liquid, finding the volume of the pop can, putting the mass of the liquid in there, and finding out how far the pop can sinks in the water. So you could do so many different experiments with this, and it's a lot of fun. It's very easy. You have graphs that are made in seconds, and it really shows you what mass, density, and volume is all about. I hope you guys learned a lot. If you guys have more questions, come to me. Thanks.